there, but we've seen Jeremy Corbyn survive big challenges before. What's the mood there? Do people see him as Labour's biggest problem?
Yeah, I think they do, actually. I think they really do see him as a bit of a nuclear disaster in this by-election in many senses. This seat is heavily dependent on the nuclear industry. 10,000 people work at the Sellafield nuclear plant here alone, and the Conservatives made a big deal out of the fact that Jeremy Corbyn has opposed nuclear energy in the past. I have lost count of the number of Labour voters we've spoken to who've said they switched to the Tories precisely because of that issue. Has to be said, Labour ran a very good campaign here on the NHS, which is to Jeremy Corbyn's credit. That does fit in well with what he has been campaigning on nationally. But you know, this isn't just a disaster for the Labour Party. It is a huge victory here for the Conservative Party. Difficult to overstate that. The Prime Minister was incredibly pleased with herself when she was visiting Millom a short time ago. Overall, though, I think difficult to say that this by-election was won out of any great enthusiasm for the Conservative parties, but rather quite a bit of scepticism, I think, about the direction of the Labour Party.
OK, Paul, thanks very much. Let's talk to Carl now. A very different story for Labour in Stoke. Before we talk about them, let's consider where this leaves UKIP. Can Paul Nuttall remain as leader after this?
Yes, I think he can. UKIP have a fairly rich history of leaders standing in elections and by-elections and losing and carrying on. Nigel Farage did it again and again and again. That said, they will be very disappointed. Of course, they hoped to win here and they didn't, but they thought that even if they didn't win, they would run Labour much, much closer. And they lost by 2,600 votes. It was a reasonably substantial loss. Now, they say that that was because they didn't have the same sort of grand operation as Labour. But I think there is also a bit of infighting about whether they fought the right campaign. Some within UKIP think that they should have really devoted more of their campaign to immigration. I spoke to the UKIP chairman this morning about what he thought had happened, and he said that UKIP hadn't had enough time to establish itself, particularly the new leader, Paul Nuttall, with the voters.
Politics is a long game, OK? It takes a little time for the electorate to get to know UKIP. We have UKIP under a new leader that's only been in place for 12 weeks. It's going to take a little bit of time for people to get used to UKIP under Paul Nuttall. What's Paul Nuttall's UKIP going to look like? That's going to take longer than 12 weeks for people to find out.
Carl, Jeremy Corbyn's on his way to Stoke right now, and earlier we discussed the challenges he faces. Are there any positives to take from his party's victory there?
Well, I mean, there are. They're fairly limited, but there are. One thing that this does tell us is that Labour is still a big established party with a machine that can turn out the vote. They know who their voters are in a way that younger, more insurgent parties like UKIP perhaps don't. And that does count for a lot, and especially in something like a by-election like this one. So that is some kind of good news for Labour. It does tell them, though, that UKIP are still snapping at their heels, and the next big by-election could be in Lee if Andy Burnham goes off to be mayor of Greater Manchester. And UKIP have already been putting in the work there. So Labour still have a lot of work to do. Hanging on like this isn't good enough for them.
OK, Carl, thanks very much. OK, let's move on to other news now. And unions are warning that as many as 10,000 jobs could be on the line after the Royal Bank of Scotland declared an annual loss of £7 billion. It means the taxpayer-owned bank remains in the red for the 9th year in a row. It doesn't expect to make a profit until 2018. Our business editor, Joel Hills, is here. And Joel, we own 70% of this bank. How should we respond to yet another loss?
Well, look, inside every bad bank, there is a good bank trying, and RBS is very trying. But look carefully at the core bank, the simpler, safer, customer-focused bank that Ross McEwen says he wants to produce, and there are reasons to be cheerful. The core bank made a profit for the second year running this year of £4.2 billion. Now, a host of one-off legacy costs and fines pushed it as a group to a £7 billion loss. This is banking, so of course there'll be bonuses. £343 million is being paid out, down though 75% on 2010. Now, in the last 2 years, the chief executive, Ross McEwen, has foregone a bonus of £1 million. This morning, he told me he's going to accept one this year, and his message to shareholders: keep the faith.
This bank is really working again. So we were very pleased with the results that we put out. I know it's really hard to take a 7 billion loss, but 10 billion of that is one-off charges, unfortunately.
Will you be accepting your bonus this year?
Yes, I will be. Well, I don't get a bonus. We're talking about a role-based allowance.
Role-based allowance, but you've given it up in previous years. You're accepting it this year.
Well, I think my thinking this year was the strategy is absolutely working. The core bank that we have been working on has delivered a really good result this year.
Well, £7 billion loss, and you're accepting a £1 million bonus. But look, I accept your point. Let's move on. In terms of cutting costs, will there be job losses? Will branches close?
Look, there will be job losses when you're taking $2 billion of cost out of an organisation our size. Yes, there will be job losses. But do I have a number? No, I don't. And will I be putting a number out there? No, I won't be. We talk to our staff first before we actually announce any job changes.
You have 1,200 branches today. How many of those do you think you need?
We will have one of the largest branch networks in the UK, but there will be less than there are today.
OK, so we mentioned the branches there, but how fast and deep will the rest of the cuts go?
Well, the union thinks 10,000 job losses over the next 4 years. Ross McEwen wouldn't say. Ross McEwen, though, says part of this is the way we're banking differently. 1 in 20 transactions are in branch. The rest is all online and on smartphones. But the key thing here is a taxpayer put £45 billion into this bank. We're told it'll be profitable by 2018, but today the share price is half what we paid for our stake. There's no guarantee we'll get all of that money back.
OK, Joel, thanks very much for that. The Leicester City chairman has defended his decision to sack manager Claudio Ranieri, saying the club is in crisis. Ranieri guided the club to win the Premier League title just last season, but after a run of defeats, they're now 17th and crashed out of the FA Cup last week after losing to League One side Millwall. Richard Pallow reports.
It was the most improbable sporting success of many a year.
The amazing Leicester City!
But just 9 months after leading Leicester to the Premier League title, Claudio Ranieri has gone from hero to zero and been sacked. Fears of relegation this season, the catalyst. No room for sentiment even after his fairy tale football story.
Very sad. I think we all know in football these things can happen. We'll have to, we make sure we remember him. He'll get the utmost respect from everybody associated with the football club in what he's achieved.
The season began as it would continue, Leicester losing to newly promoted Hull in the opening game. Within a month, they were out of the League Cup. But since the start of the year, it's got even worse, not scoring a single goal in the Premier League in 2017 at all. And then last weekend, they crashed out of the FA Cup at the hands of League One side Millwall.
Combining with Drinkwater, it's a first-time ball to Jamie Vardy.
Senior players apparently told Leicester's owners that they were unhappy with Ranieri after their Champions League game on Wednesday. Ironically, the manager himself was full of optimism.
And this match, I think, get us a lot of confidence.
The club's Thai chairman saw differently in a cryptic statement saying, "We do not have one problem to solve, but there are a million things to do to make our club survive. Please respect my decision. I will never let the club down."
Really sad for Claudio. I think it's a disappointing day for managers all around the world, wherever you go, if this is what can happen.
And most Leicester fans would appear to agree.
Shocked, devastated. I can't really believe it.
If the change keeps the club in the Premier League, then supporters will surely come round. If it doesn't, then removing the mastermind of Leicester's greatest ever moment may prove a huge mistake. Richard Pallow, ITV News.
Still to come. New plans for fast-track university degrees, but do they come at too great a price? And saving the red squirrel, a new attempt to rescue a national treasure. But first, investigators in Malaysia say they believe a weapon of mass destruction was used to kill the half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-nam died shortly after appearing to be attacked by 2 women at Kuala Lumpur airport last week. Sharon Thomas reports.
Kim Jong-nam killed by a weapon of mass destruction. Malaysian toxicology reports indicate that the substance wiped on his face as he walked through Kuala Lumpur airport was a VX nerve agent. The chemicals were found on swabs taken from Mr. Kim's eyes and face. The clear liquid is the most potent of the known chemical warfare agents. It took just minutes to take effect. It's not just how, but who was behind the killing that's still hugely contested. North Korea blamed the Malaysians. In the city of Putrajaya, the lead investigator rejected that entirely.
The entire world knows that the investigation has been objective, impartial, and also transparent. The ambassador has been informed the process involved, but he continues to be delusional and spew lies and accusations against our government.
7 North Koreans are still being sought. In the meantime, Mr. Kim's body is still in a mortuary. There's even a diplomatic dispute over who should claim it. Sharon Thomas, ITV News.
The woman who died in Wolverhampton during yesterday's storm has been named. Tani Martin suffered serious head injuries after wooden debris from a nearby building hit her. The 29-year-old worked at the University of Wolverhampton. Road rage killer Kenneth Noy has won a High Court battle which could see him moved to an open prison. He's serving a life sentence for the 1996 murder of Stephen Cameron in an attack on the M25. In 2015, a parole board recommendation that Noy should be moved to an open prison was rejected. And the boss of auto group PSA has reassured the government he doesn't want to close down Vauxhall plants in the UK if his company takes over the business. Carlos Tavares says he wants to expand production in Britain and honour existing commitments to the plants. Universities in England could soon be allowed to offer new degrees that take just 2 years to complete but cost more than traditional courses. The Department of Education has just published the plans, which would see students charged up to £13,500 a year for the so-called fast-track degrees. In exchange, students undertaking the 2-year courses will work more intensively, receive shorter holidays, and as they say, it offers more flexible courses that students are crying out for. I'm joined now by Madeleine Ansell from the University Alliance and Sarana Vieru, NUS Vice President of Higher Education. Thank you both for joining us. Madeleine, I'm going to start with you. Why do you think this is such a good idea?
I think this is a good idea because although there will always be a lot of students, particularly those coming from school, that will want to do the traditional route, the 3-year route, and have that kind of experience, we also have mature students, students who are already at work, students with caring responsibilities, who would much rather be able to get through their degree more quickly and then get on to use that degree in the workplace.
Well, Sarana, you represent students, and apparently it's something that students have been crying out for. Is that correct?
Flexibility is always welcome, but I think we shouldn't compromise on the student experience, and there are some outstanding questions that need to be answered through the plans.
Now, when you say student experience, do you mean of living in halls and hanging out with new people and
the academic
maturing?
experience and the extracurricular activities.
But you're
and
still
also
getting the academic stuff because you're still learning.
Yeah, but I don't think we should be looking at concentrating training and teaching into 2 years at the expense of your free time that you actually spend in extracurricular activities and also engagement with employers and also doing part-time work in order to sustain yourself because the loans are not covering our living expenses.
Well, Madeleine, it's interesting that Sarana brings that up because is this going to be a disadvantage to poorer students because the courses are more expensive and they may not necessarily be able to work alongside it?
Well, overall, the chances are that overall the courses won't be more expensive. So the government has said £13,500 a year over 2 years. That's the same as £27,000 over 3 years. So the amount that you borrow won't be any more. In addition, you may well not need to spend quite so much on maintenance because you'll be getting into the workplace faster. To give you a real-world example, CU Coventry University, that has campuses in Coventry, Scarborough and in Barking and Dagenham, already run this model.
Okay.
And the way that they do it is you can take your courses in the morning, in the afternoon or in the evening, and that really suits mature students who need to work alongside their study.
Well, Sarana was saying that people do want the flexibility, so it sounds as if it's something worth discussing, looking around. Well, Sarana and Madeleine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, there is more on this story on our website, and you can take part in our poll on whether you think shorter courses are a good idea. That's at itv.com/news. Finally, they're considered a British national treasure among wildlife experts, and Prince Charles has even considered having a native red squirrel as a royal pet. But their population is rapidly diminishing, and conservationists warn they could be extinct within 35 years. Their plan to help the red squirrel's plight? An army of squirrel saviours. Helena Carter reports.
They may not know it, but these red-headed treasures are a rare sight indeed. And if we're not careful, they could disappear entirely. Wildlife trusts are seeking an army of 5,000 volunteers to help save the UK's last remaining native red squirrels. Their main rival, the much more common grey squirrel, introduced from the United States in the 1800s.
The Wildlife Trusts have come up with a great idea to encourage volunteers to help monitor the populations of red squirrels, to check their populations and see whether there's grey squirrels invading in the area, put food out for them, monitor camera traps.
In post-war Britain, the native red squirrel lived in woodlands across the UK. But over the last 60 years, the areas they inhabit have been taken over by greys. By the turn of the decade, reds were confined to just the north of England, Scotland and parts of Ireland. Today, it's thought there are less than 140,000 red squirrels left in the UK. They may not have the most glamorous of reputations, but that hasn't stopped them attracting the attention of Prince Harry. And out and about in Wales today, another royal who's always keen to fight the Reds' corner.
My great ambition is to have one in the house, I hate to tell you. Sitting on the breakfast table and on my shoulder, but that's another story.
A story that, if we aren't careful, is at risk of an unhappy ending. Experts say if help doesn't come soon, the red squirrel could be extinct within 35 years. Food for thought indeed. Helena Carter, ITV News.
Well, that's it from us this lunchtime. We'll be back with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The News Where You Are follows the national weather, but from everybody here on the Lunchtime team, enjoy your afternoon. Goodbye.